Welcome back. Let's go on with the Upanishads commentary. This one will be about spiritual transformation, or as they actually stated, spiritual suicides, which at first might sound a little grotesque if we take the term on its own, but it's actually very fascinating from a metaphysical point of view. So let me narrate what is being shared here. Worlds there are without suns, covered up with darkness. To these after death go the ignorant, slayers of the self. Verily, those worlds of the Asuras are enveloped in blind darkness, and thereto they all repair after death who are slayers of Atman. This is the translation of Swami Nikalinanda. The Upanishadic seer opens by speaking of the way of fulfilled and joyful life, seeing the divine in all things and living on the earth according to divine law. But this is not the only world in which we can find ourselves, as we move through a cycle of continuous birth and death. Birth into one world after having died out of another, or another birth into the world where we were just living. When we speak of birth, we usually think only of a physical embodiment on this earth. But when we die in this world, we are born into an astral world, where we remain for some time, and then die to that world and become born back into this world. Although this world remains virtually the same, despite the fact that every generation thinks it is a great advance over previous eras, we can spend time in a vast array of astral worlds, positive and negative, pleasant and unpleasant. The earth becomes a kind of stable place of return for us, or is it? Many births, many worlds. Although the earth accommodates a wide range of spiritual and psychological evolution, the astral worlds are more specialized. There is an astral world for every degree of consciousness. These worlds can be classified just as sentient beings are classified. That does not say much, since each person can have a different set of criteria for such classification. But the masters of wisdom have generally agreed there are two basic kinds of people, suras and asuras. Those who dwell in the light and those who live in the dark, divine and demonic, are commonly used to translate Sura or Deva and Asura. Asura, Deva, is in the light, and Asura is not. Sometimes a person dwells in the dark by choice, but most often it is a state of ignorance rather than negative volition. Because of this, we need to avoid a Deva is good, Asura is bad reaction in all cases, though there are instances when this is accurate, and to repress it would be foolish and asuric. The 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Practically speaking, however, that is, looking at the result of manifesting those natures, it is just that simple. An entire chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is directed to this manner of divine and demonic nature as it manifests in human beings. I know it is pretty lengthy, but it is so insightful and complete that it merits inclusion here. Sri Krishna speaks. A man who is born with tendencies toward the divine is fearless and pure in heart. He perseveres in that path to union with Brahman, which the scriptures and his teachers have taught him. He is charitable. He can control his passions. He studies the scriptures regularly and obeys their directions. He practices spiritual disciplines. He is straightforward, truthful, and of an even temper. He harms no one. He renounces the things of this world. He has a tranquil mind and an unmalicious tongue. He is compassionate toward all. He is not greedy. He is gentle and modest. He abstains from useless activity. He has faith in the strength of his higher nature. He can forgive and endure. He is clean in thought and act. He is free from hatred and from pride. Such qualities are his birthright. When a man is born with demonic tendencies, his birthright is hypocrisy, arrogance, conceit, anger, cruelty, and ignorance. The birthright of the divine nature leads to liberation. The birthright of the demonic nature leads to greater bondage. But you need not fear. Arjuna, your birthright is divine. In this world there are two kinds of beings, those whose nature tends toward the divine, and those who have the demonic tendencies. I have already described the divine nature to you in some detail. Now we shall learn more about the demonic nature. Men of demonic nature know neither what they ought to do, nor what they should refrain from doing. There is no truth in them, or purity, or right conduct. They maintain that the scriptures are a lie, and that the universe is not based upon a moral law, but godless. conceived in lust and created by copulation, without any other cause. Because they believe this in the darkness of their little minds, these degraded creatures do horrible deeds, attempting to destroy the world. They are enemies of mankind. Their lust can never be appeased. They are arrogant and vain and drunk with pride. They run blindly after what is evil. The ends they work for are unclean. They are sure that life has only one purpose, gratification of the senses, and so they are plagued by innumerable cares from which death alone can release them. Anxiety binds them with 100 chains, delivering them over to lust and wrath. They are ceaselessly busy, piling up dishonest gains to satisfy their cravings. I wanted this and today I got it. I want that, I shall get it tomorrow. All these riches are now mine. Soon I shall have more. I have killed this enemy, I will kill all the rest. I am a ruler of men. I enjoy the things of this world. I am successful, strong and happy. Who is my equal? I am so wealthy and so nobly born. I will sacrifice to the gods. I will give alms. I will make merry. That is what they say to themselves in the blindness of their ignorance. They are addicts of sensual pleasure, made restless by their many desires, and caught in a net of delusion. They fall into the filthy hell of their own evil minds, conceited, haughty, foolishly proud, and intoxicated by their wealth. They offer sacrifice to God, in name only, for outward show, without following the sacred rituals. These malign creatures are full of egoism, vanity and lust, wrath and consciousness of power. They loathe me and deny my presence, both in themselves and in others. They are enemies of all men and of myself, cruel, despicable and vile. I cast them back again and again into the wombs of degraded parents, subjecting them to the wheel of birth and death, and so they are constantly reborn in degradation and delusion. They do not reach me, but sink down to the lowest possible condition of the soul. Am I an asura? What are the basic traits that render someone an asura? The Upanishad had already given them. 1. Spiritual blindness. 2. Spiritual darkness. 3. Spiritual ignorance. And 4. Engaging in deeds that kill the awareness and the freedom of the eternal, immortal divine self. The first 3 are what dispose us to the 4th, destructive trait. Krishna has already given us quite an exposition of the ways of the asuric personality, but it can all be summed up in their effect, the negation of consciousness of the individual spirit. Now this point that spiritual ignorance is a matter of unawareness of the individual spirit, our own Atman, is particularly important because many asuras think to hide their status under an externalized cloak of religiosity, of supposed belief in a dedication to God. But this is all nonsense. St. John the Apostle comments that no one can legitimately claim to love God whom they have not seen if they have no love for their fellow human beings whom they have seen. In the same way, it is absurd to pretend that we know or are aware of the infinite spirit when we are not aware of the finite spirit, our own self, which is right within us. This is why Buddha simply refused to speak about God or gods and insisted that each one must seek for nirvana alone, rejecting all other matters as harmful distractions. Another Upanishad states that if we learn about water from a single cup of water, we can then know about oceans of water. In the same way, if we come to truly comprehend our nature as spirit, we will be able to know God, the infinite spirit. And thus self-knowledge, knowledge of our spirit, is essential. Shankara says that until we know the self, we are all asuras in the absolute sense. But if we are seeking to know the self, I expect the distinction is not so drastic. An asura then is one whose life and thought obscure and darken the inner consciousness, so the true self remains unknown and buried, often even unsuspected as to its existence. It has nothing to do with the philosophers. It has nothing to do with what philosophers and theologians say about it. The matter is thoroughly pragmatic. Do we or don't we? Are we or aren't we? Verbal claims mean nothing here. State of being only matters. The world of the asuras. Because it is their will, asuras are born over and over in worlds, enveloped in blind darkness at the time of their death, earthly or astral. Naturally, our thoughts go to the ideas of hell, so beloved to all religionists, East and West. Whether it is the absurdly simplistic fire pit of Christianity, or the horrifying complex and lurid hells of Hinduism, Taoism, or Buddhism. But what is this world in which we presently find ourselves? A world ravaged with hatred, violence, disease, cruelty and aggressive ignorance and greed. The fact that there is also kindness, love, mercy and toleration in the world makes it even more crazy, schizophrenic, and schizophrenogenic, making us crazy. No wonder The Onion, a satirical magazine, ran an article entitled "God Diagnosed with Bipolar Disorder." It might seem blasphemous, but it is the preposterous religion prevailing in the West that is blasphemous, and the satire is just pointing it out. Someone once asked Paramhansa Yogananda if he believed in hell. He smiled and asked, "Where do you think you are?" A very good question indeed. We write our own ticket by the way we think and act. No amount of rationalization or assurance from others will change this fact. If we seek darkness, we will find darkness. If we seek the light, we will find the light. Nothing more, nothing less. Ask and it shall be given you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. For everyone that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh it shall be opened. Just be aware of the consequences. And that was the end of this commentary. It's absolutely fascinating again, and pretty disturbing maybe to a certain extent, some of these descriptions they're giving here about life and spirit. But I think ultimately, if we look beyond it, it is true that it's simply indicating to us again that it's up to us to decide which direction we're going to grow in with our own consciousness, with our own soul. We're going to have to develop the light within our hearts so that it can grow into a better, greater direction of awareness, fuller expansion and expression of the spirit of life itself. Or we're allowed to go into the darkness and do destructive things. It's all up to us in the end. So which side are we going to pick? That remains the main question throughout our entire eternal journey. And what a journey it's going to be. It already is a fascinating journey, but it is all very interesting also to consider whether in a way we're not already perhaps in some sort of hell, physically speaking, because we can become aware of greater and greater powers, but it is almost like the body currently is sort of holding us limited in place, holding us back to fully express the freedom of the spirit itself. But these are all subjects that we might get into over time in general. Now, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing to receive inspirational videos on a regular basis. And with that being said, dear viewer, never forget that we are the dreamers.